Me. Who else? You check. Steve, right? Any judge like that? Steve,
Come back up.
there should be 5 of you. How many judges should you have? 5. I think with Steve it can be. No, with Steve it's complete, okay? Give me 2 seconds. Steve? Yeah, I'm coming, sorry. Yeah.
But Steve,
Bang. Right, so now we have all the judges. Congratulations to everyone for coming to the finals of the 2019 KIDA. Government. No, let's not do that now. Okay, fine. Congratulations to all the teams. Under the motion, upon turning 18, they substitute individuals' choice between consenting to a codified social contract with their respective states for living in designated state-free zones. Let's start this day by inviting the Prime Minister to podium.
Let's set context to this debate because probably that's going to be really important, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, let's hit some critical things that we want to talk about. First of all, what is this codified social contract? What does it look like? We tell you first of all, before we inform or give the choice of this codified social contract, we believe that essential education about the nature of the state, including outside perspectives of the state and current nature of the state and possible future perspectives, will all be included in the type of education in the moment that we give this social contract to these people as well. We tell you, therefore, they're allowed to make informed decisions about the current predicaments and understand the current predicaments even better. Moreover, we tell you that this is going to be active, obviously, individual choice in which this person can actively choose into. And last of all, this codified social contract will be equivalent to agreeing to the legitimacy of the government or agreeing to being subject of that current regime / government. We tell you that this choice will be granted to all people once they hit 18 because of their ability to process this information, as this is a norm and standard of what we believe to be when you can have cognitive thought and to affect your own life. Second of all, what does this state-free zone look like? How are we going to give it to you? I think there needs to be some level of fiat here, and that we have to assume that the state-free zone will happen, that there will, the international community will create the state-free zone. Sure.
Would this codified social contract be evolving, in which different people will sign for different versions, or would it be unilateral, in which everyone has to sign to the same social contract?
I think it's. We think that it will be rather unilateral in that we don't necessarily see exactly how this different preferences necessarily differ from person to person. We tell you, nonetheless, we give you education about what that current predicament is and what that probably affects to you are as also. You don't necessarily see how this social contract can necessarily differ from the get-go. But second of all, what will this state-free zone look like? We tell you for the sake of it, we're going to give them Texas. And we're going to give them the best possible land, best possible infrastructure, and best possible resources of that land available. Why? Because we tell you that for the sake of sustainability and for the sake of stability, we like to give these people oppressed, if given the opportunity, the best possible land in which they can thrive off that land and therefore not be dependent and be self-sustainable within that own land as well. No, thank you. So on that, we tell you that necessary infrastructure of currently Texas, for example, will constantly exist. These types of schools will still be there. Types of, for instance, defense mechanisms will still be there as well for Texas itself. That state-free zone will not necessarily be brink of collapse as the moment we create it. We tell you that there's more than enough ample opportunity for people to maximize opportunities off of that. No, thank you. On that, three arguments, right? First of all, why is this essentially principally important? Why is this so principally valuable? Second of all, why is it especially most impactful for the people the most vulnerable and giving choice in of itself? Why does it have inherent value? And last of all, what would it look like? Why would it not be a shithole? First of all, why does consent matter? We tell you that actual social contracts don't exist. It's a philosophical thought that we have, that we say that these people somehow subjected themselves into these contracts at the moment of birth and when the moment that they're born underneath certain parents or born underneath arbitrary borders and lines. And from that moment, these people and regimes and governments are allowed to allow power over these people and actively control these people and punish them accordingly if they do not follow the regulations that they want. We tell you that is equivalent to basically any type of other oppression as well. We tell you that goes the same for slavery. If we tell you that there's no difference from slavery from that point, we tell you that the moment that when because simply you're born under certain predicaments or simply you're born under certain conditions that you are subject to somebody else's rule and power is equivalent to slavery. We tell you that from the get-go is false state legitimacy and something that's actively oppressing other people. We tell you principally this type of oppression can never be justified under status quo, and if given the opportunity, should always be given the opportunity to legitimize, if given the opportunity, we should be given the opportunity to legitimize states, first of all, and that they have proper actual legitimate consent from the people that they rule and consent of the people who wish to be ruled. But second of all, we give these people who don't want to be a part of the social contract an actual option when they don't have to enter a certain contract with any sort of state if they choose not to be. Second of all, why is it especially important for the most vulnerable? We tell you that especially the most vulnerable, the people who are oppressed in these states, are most likely going to have inherent value from this choice for two major reasons. First of all, recognize that a lot of oppressed people, despite if they go and decide to immigrate to another state or migrate to another state, for instance, we tell you that it's likely not going to improve the scenario, and rather it's a choice between between a rock and a hard place, right? We tell you for those reasons that because if you're likely oppressed in a certain state, for a lot of these global minorities, that you're probably going to be oppressed in another state as well. Status quo options are not valuable or inherently good options for these people. We tell you that when many people are inherently in any type of government structure going to be oppressed at the end of the day, there is a need and therefore inherent value in giving people a choice of not opting into a government structure from the get-go. But yeah,
the only reason why you think minorities would have a better time is because you're giving them better land and resources in which they don't have access to now. That's not protected by the fiat.
We'll clarify that as to what the state-free zone will look like in our third argument, but moreover, we still think that regardless, that there's inherent value of providing these people a choice, especially compared to the predicament where you don't give them choice or give them the choices between horrible options, is a much better alternative which government presents to you, and that in and of itself gives these people agency, gives these people power, and we tell you that type of empowerment is something that's always valuable, something that always should be stood for. But last of all, what would this state-free zone look like? We tell you that this state-free zone is inherently going to be an anarchist type of zone in which no government truly controls over this. We tell you, under the philosophy and the governmental structure of communitarianism, where these types of communities are formed and these specific type of peoples perform specific types of roles within their society without inherently or necessarily creating authoritarian structures or power hierarchies, is something that's extremely viable within these state-free zones as well. We tell you why. Because first of all, the type of people who are elected to be in these zones, first of all, are people who are entirely against these types of power structures, people who are entirely against this type of format of hierarchy. We tell you that therefore they're actively incentivized, and because they have also seen the harms of which many of themselves, or perhaps loved ones or other friends or family members have gone through because of the harms of hierarchy, the harms of government, we tell you that they're less likely to create this oppressive government from the get-go. So we tell you, at the end of the day, especially with the availability of current infrastructure and current resources, there's also no true necessity or no immediate necessity for these people to resort to this type of power structure or resort to these type of things for the sake of resource grabbing or for the sake of resource collecting. Overall, what have we told you today? We told you that, first of all, principally, how we legitimize states, but more importantly, take away oppressed people, slave people from their states and give them true options in which they can truly free themselves. But more importantly, we also told you why the state-free zone is inherently not necessarily a horrible option for these people as well. Proud to propose.
panel, opening opposition thinks that humanity has gone far already and progressed enough and continuously have been improving in terms of what is the right thing to do. We think that we are on the right trend of history in terms of writing it correctly in order for us to be able to protect the majority, at least to spread the concept of democracy. 3 things I'd like to do in my opening speech. 1, I'll talk about why the choice should not be there to begin with, because the codified social contract is problematic at best. And second, the state-free zone is actually more controversial and horrendous and scary if you're going to look at it. And that's why what we're going to do is we're simply going to defend the status quo. I'm going to walk you through with all of these 3 scenarios. Because up until now, they still need to be able to discuss to us that these 2 options will be able to create some sort of social order, whether with the presence or the absence of the government. And second, that individuals will be able to pursue happiness. And why we think that in the current situation of constantly checking and correcting and improving the situation, that's the best situation where we get to somehow protect the majority. Now, all responses would be integrated in my speech. First, let's look into the codified social contract. Okay, let's look into what kind of society would this look like. The problem with this, especially when Andrew somehow conceded that this would be a unilateral contract, is that we think that the moment you do that, then the contract becomes time-bound. By that we mean everything that you're going to sign would be stagnant. Remember, laws right now are reflective of the current norms that we have. Most countries, for example, do not have gay marriage because the majority of the norm is conservative. But the nice thing about democracy is that it keeps changing eventually as generations progress. But if you have a contract that says that it's a unilateral law, then it becomes the rule of the majority at that specific time when the contract was made. And the worst part is that you're going to make everyone sign for these things. To some extent, the only option for you to stay in that state-controlled area is for you to be able to opt into that anachronistic old concept of what it is supposed to be for you to rule that certain situation, right? After the first situation, right? So we think that there's actually very rigid. You're only going to allow the conservative to be able to somehow rule everything there. But worse there is that the conservative fights back at the moment that people actually complain in a situation that, oh, you did not sign for this. We did not offer you this kind of protection, so too bad that you actually signed for all of these things. So the situation that you're doing here is that you're simply pushing the minority out of the state then. Because at that particular moment when, the rules becomes dictated by the majority, and when you promote the concept of democracy, there's no change eventually. The gay people would normally exit, for example. Those minorities, social minorities that are not currently protected by these codified social contract will eventually go to your state-free zone. But then again, is the state-free zone really that rosy to begin with? Because they say they mentioned that, oh, it's gonna be anarchist. But then again, imagine this is just like after a war or how the world starts, right? The thing about here is that eventually you need to be able to create some social norms. And eventually someone will take control of the situation. It may not be democratic, it may not be a state, but there will be something. And we think that becomes problematic. But before that, yes, Mike.
How are all of your criticisms of a codified social contract not applicable to current systems of laws and citizenships anyway?
I'll discuss that later and discuss with you why democracy. The nice thing about democracy is that you can be hard with your opinion until you change your mind. And that's what we like in the current situation. That democracy is flexible and eventually it's on the trend in terms of protecting everyone and become lenient in the situation. But going back to the state-free zone, right? We think that eventually you're not gonna achieve this anarchist and like, oh, no one cares about me. I get to do everything, right? Because eventually you still need to be able to socialize. You need to be able to trade with other people. You need to live and eventually norms and orders will be there. Who will be able to set all of these things, right? They said there will be no authority. That's not true. Most likely, this would be somehow be controlled by the first dwellers, right? Those who first move in that area. Worse, or if those first dwellers or anyone who has actually a control over the land. Because the thing about human beings is that we're greedy, right? We always want power. And the moment that you'll be able to secure some wealth, areas, like you build certain communities and you gated that, you would say, that's yours. And the worst part about us is that we don't just simply want a small piece, we want more, right? So basically what you're creating there is you're having another power game without someone checking it on the top, right? Because at the end, this will be the first dwellers who would somehow eventually control all of these things. power corrupts, and we think that that will be the problem in your state-free zone, right? Because you're simply going to somehow fall into the trap of those people who would be newly coming in to be subjected to the whims of the initial people who stayed in your state-free zone, and that becomes more problematic. I don't know how you're going to regulate that without an overarching body just like a state. I think your state-free zone will be a problematic situation for the minorities who cannot be subjected to your codified, to the initial state that they've been to. And the worst part of this codified state is that this will be the place of those who are wealthy enough, who are already in power, because this is the only way for them to be able to maintain the situation. Now, why is status quo fine, right? We think that status quo is fine because democracy has this fuzzy moral claim in terms of how we're supposed to make things better, right? The trend now is actually very progressive. If you look at all democracy and semi-democracies all over the world, there is a progressive movement. Pin it to education and pin it to the internet. And we think that the nice thing about here is that because of the education and understanding that we have based from our history, we get to somehow identify the culprit of the past. We tend to rectify all of these things. We even made developed countries promise green technology to the poor countries. The current situation in terms of democracy works is actually good. That's in terms of the collective one. But more importantly, in terms of the individual one, it's best because you have affirmative action and social welfare for these individuals because they're supposed to be part of your community. It allows us in the current situation to have a collective effort of constantly reimagining a community where everyone becomes benefited by the system. Because you're supposed to be, for example, Korean, then you must be able to get all the benefits just like what everyone is receiving in the present situation. And that's basically the nice thing about nation state. And yes, the state might be arbitrary, but arbitrariness does not mean it's a bad thing. We think when the state created, even though it was arbitrary, it was a good thing. Because now you need to be able to assess why the current system that we have right now is actually working. It may not be perfect, but it is changing, right? You've seen gay marriage being legalized, weed being legalized. We've seen how we become more inclusive when it comes to minorities in the current situation. And it's not gonna stop because that's the promise of democracy. Right now we may be very hard in terms of something, but eventually if there's another group of people who would somehow think that maybe the old people had got it wrong, we can change it in the present situation. And that's the beauty of democracy, and that's why the status quo is fine. You may have some problems with it, but there will be organic changes happening anyway. You just need a critical number eventually. So at the end of the day, this motion is very scary because the first option is that you make those powerful people just have a simple claim and a monolithic claim to society. The second one is where you will create more problematic situation for those who want to opt out. What we're saying is that the status quo is fine because it's stagnant. It's not stagnant. There's a room for us to be able to improve things, and hence we oppose this motion.
I think the Leader of Opposition for his remarks. UPM, you're here.
Are you good to go? As debaters, we often make arguments about the social contract, that people are responsible to the state and the state is responsible to the people because everyone at the time of their birth signed this invisible contract that law came up with. I am firmly of the belief that this is an incredibly stupid argument for the very obvious reason that I never signed this weird invisible contract, you never signed this weird invisible contract, none of us signed this. Here's why open opposition's argument is nonsensical. It already states function under the weird assumption that everyone signed this agreement, and that's the reason why the democratic state structures can happen, because people have agreed to this, is the assumption already. There's no reason why we can have the democratic structures that they talk about described in this codified contract. There's no reason that open opposition tells you as to why this codified social contract has to be something that is completely set in stone for there to be absolutely no change. We can say that people agree to the democratic structures that are already in society, as we already assume that is not the debate that open opposition operates under. Because obviously that unilateral does not mean not changing at all. Already the state structure that we're already under is unilateral in the sense that we cannot choose what democratic structures we operate under. That does not mean that the democratic structures are not ever changed, are not ever set in stone. I think that necessarily means that they just misconstrue the argument that Andrew gave you. But also, let's just please, let's debate about the principles, right? The model can be fixed along are problems with it. Obviously, it cannot be completely sure that the model is perfect, but obviously there has to be other principles of whether these people should be guaranteed the choice of whether to live with their own state, or whether they should be given the opportunity to live to that state-free zone. Hopefully Texas, maybe not necessarily that great, but still, we think that that's the principle that this state ought to be under. Let's please be generous, let's not make this a moral bash. This is that for everyone. Three things in this speech. Firstly, why this choice is absolutely critical for the most vulnerable in society. Secondly, what this anarchist land looks like. Thirdly, what the current states would look like. Firstly, on why this choice is absolutely critical. Because maybe someone is correct. Let's assume for a moment that we cannot get the people of Texas. Let's assume for a moment that this anarchist land will be fucked over economically because they don't have the resources, as maybe we cannot be at that. Why is this choice still important, even if this state-free zone isn't particularly that great economically? Firstly, because obviously different types of oppression exist, and different types of priorities do exist. So as a minority born in a certain state, for example, as a gay individual born in a state where homosexuality is illegal, for example, your priority might not necessarily be economic subsistence, but the opportunity to actually actively live upon your sexuality and actively be able to actualize your identity, which necessarily means that for different people, maybe this idea of being able to access the state of origin is not necessarily a priority over you getting other things, which necessarily means that it is preferable that we give people an option, even if the state-free zone is worse off economically, for those people to opt into this and to actually choose what they prioritize with their lives. But secondly, I would just note to you that given that we can also see what is happening around the world and probably what the state-free zone looks like, even if the state-free zone is terrible, we think that it's still preferable that we give these people a choice. Because the fact is, these people have never chosen to be born into their current state already. So if these people can assess the different situations, believe that the state-free zone is preferable to horrible states of oppression, at least we give them that option. I obviously concede it's not a perfect choice, given that probably both options are quite bad. It's still preferable to a status quo where nothing changes for these people and these people are never given a choice to begin with. The fact that we're able to still correct for the birth lottery by giving these people a second choice in this sense is something that's still valuable. But furthermore, I think it also legitimizes the state and also makes sure that people are able to subscribe to the state and believe that the state is the people who are in the state are the ones who actually believe in it. It's crucial that people who actually are in the state now are those who prefer the social contract, who actually validate the social contract, which necessarily means that the fact that the state oppression exists is okay for those people in the sense that these people have actually consented to that. That is also a benefit that Andrew talks about, which is completely unengaged to by Jan. But secondly then, what does the anarchist land look like? Jan Vincent Galas tells us two things. First thing he tells us that the first goal is to control everything. Firstly, I just do not think that this is necessarily true, in the sense that, obviously, this is a Viet here too. We have to debate under the assumption that this is a stateless land, or a state land without a state. The essence of a state is authority, and the fact is, even if you say that we can have a stateless land with stateless land with an authority, that's kind of it's kind of tautology, right? It just doesn't work that way. You need to assume that there is no state in this land. That is the Viet here. But also, I would just note that even if this is true, that people are innately greedy, as Jan would like to say, I think that is grossly mischaracterizing the basic idea of human nature. Because yes, human beings are greedy. Human beings are also empathetic. Human beings also have very nice ideas of how to conceptualize other people's suffering and how to conceptualize what other people are going through. And this is specifically important if we think about the people who have been moving to the stand. Because crucially, these are people who are dissatisfied with their state already, probably due to oppression that they experience already, which means that they oftentimes understand the sufferings that other people who go to this state-free zone have gone through, which necessarily means that the priority for these people isn't always necessarily, I want to be better off economically, I want to be fucking rich. It's oftentimes making sure that there is no oppression in that area because they understand what that oppression feels like and make sure that they understand how that they make sure that other people don't go through a very similar experience in front of their faces. Which necessarily means that in terms of likeliness, they're far more likely to form the society that Andrew talks about. Communitarian society in which everyone can be better off, where everyone does not go through oppression because people can understand the oppression of others and are far more likely to prefer that world. I'll take closing.
Fiat only gives you the right that there might be a state-free zone. It doesn't give a fiat for you to win, nor have a utopia simply because you say and will it say.
That's why I said, even if it's not a utopia, it's still better that people have the choice. But it is likely to be a utopia for the reason that these people are the oppressed and oftentimes would prefer a society without that oppression. You're ignoring the argument here. But thirdly, what does the current state look like? All relies on democracy, telling us that we are progressing. This completely ignores the horrible reality of capitalism. Because what capitalism is doing is it is fucking over those democratic structures that all relies on. Because what does capitalism actually look like? It looks like corporations controlling capital, which necessarily involves media coverage, which often also infiltrates into democratic institutions that they have on their side. So even if they talk about democratic representation, they have to engage with how this actually functions under a capitalist world, in which the rich dominate a lot of the media coverage and often infiltrate into the amount of access of information that the poor get and the amount of say that the poor are able to have inside these societies. And let's just note here, globalization has made this far more pertinent, wrecking the democratic structures of nations outside of these corporations even, which necessarily means that the structures are likely to work far worse on their side. But moreover, we need are likely to improve on our side house for the obvious reason that if people understand that the minority of the people in the lower brackets of society are moving out, and they understand that the states rely on middle classes to exist, they often necessarily have a reason to necessarily make sure that these people stay in their nation, to make things better off for those people if this choice is given to those people. We think that social contract is a good thing, but it needs to actually exist for the benefits to happen for those reasons we're ahead.
I think that opening government's failure to engage in our first argument essentially destroys their argument about how having two choices is important, because essentially what our claim was, if you show the choice, it becomes the first choice becomes more oppressive, because nations now no longer have the incentive to care about minorities because they can simply show them the door out. Because it becomes extremely costly to care for disabled people or minorities in the status quo, the social contract is going to look something like, we're not going to protect disabled people. If you don't like our social contract, go to the state-free zones, and therefore the nations in the current status quo are going to be more oppressive and more disprivileged. And therefore you can't say you nominally have two choices and therefore it's good. You're showing them two worse off options, which is exactly why their whole case fails. We believe that in the current status quo, it's extremely hard for conservatives to operate, because the only way they counter this whole liberal trend has to occur by painting themselves evil, especially because Jan mentioned that there is a fuzzy moral claim that you must do something, and the only reason that conservatives have to go against it is by looking evil. However, if you have a contract that everyone signs, conservatives can also achieve this goal by not looking bad. They can seem fair. You sign this contract, we're just honoring the contract. And therefore, it's easier for conservatives to be either complacent or actually regress liberal trends that are happening, because they are going to paint themselves fair and objective. And note that majorities have a higher tendency to cater towards conservatives here because they don't want to care or incur a huge social cost by caring for the minorities. We think that minorities are not given two choices, but are coerced into living in these state-free zones. I'll once again explore why these state-free zones are bad. I'll first of all engage with their best case scenario, in which, best land, best resources. First of all, if you don't have a central authority, I'm unclear as to which entity gets this best land and resources anyways, and therefore you propagate the tragedy of the commons, in which this society becomes unsustainable. But second, even if you disregard the claim coming from Jan saying that the first movers would have an advantage, it would look like a society in which there was no state. And if you look at why the state was created to begin with, it was because it was a world where power dominates. And therefore, weaker people would have lesser say there, and you can't fiat this by saying that, there's no central authority, and therefore there will be no hierarchy of power, because you have regional powers even if you don't have central authorities. Look at Syria, for example. There's no central authority, but there are regional cults and religious groups that still have power hierarchy systems inside, and therefore minorities, even if they go there, would still be oppressed under some system. Let's also engage their best case scenario, saying that people would be sympathetic and people would have decision-making processes together. The reason why this doesn't work is because people can't self-suffice. They can't get everything that they need. They would have to form community blocks in which decisions in your best case scenario would be made on a democratic level. Note that there will be disparities of arguments, and therefore even in these societies people would have different ideas and notions about what they think is right. So if it becomes an 8-2 split, the notion of the two people will still not be heard in these state-free zones, which exactly hinders their principle, because what their principle wanted was for everyone to choose what they contribute to the society and what they get it back. Even in these state-free zones, as long as people can't self-suffice, there will be a structure in which people would have to decide on common community goals, which therefore means that there will still be a minority group in which their ideas and arguments will not be heard. But lastly, even if we concede that there will be no central authority, there will be no decision-making process, we think that this is bad because you can't fiat that everyone will be very morally good and therefore no crimes would happen. Once crimes happen or some bad things happen, there's no retribution on that on your side, which essentially means that it's very easy and prone for people to opt into things like crimes for their own selfish benefits, and there's no check and balance on that mechanism, and therefore it's very easy for people to actually opt into easy choices for their own selfish needs. And I think that it's not you cannot fiat that everyone will be good. As long as there's one person who's selfish, it's a trickle down and a ripple effect because people now see that it's very easy to be selfish and the people who are selfish are better off. And therefore it becomes a societal ripple effect. As long as the judges, I'm pretty sure, are sensible enough to believe that Gov can't fiat that everyone is sympathetic and everyone is moral to the highest degree, as long as there's one crime or one immoral deed happening and society sees that that person is actually better off, we think that that society is going to be very bad. I'll take some closing. Oh.
The people who go to these zones and form these communities are those who are sick and tired of state authority and majority rule. Why would the majority of the people in those lands be okay with the authority that's formed on your side?
Okay, then the premise of that argumentation is if you are oppressed once in your life, you will become sympathetic to all the other sufferings of other people. One, that's not true because the oppression you experience is likely to be intersectional. So the oppression you get from poverty or homosexuality or religious oppression would be each different, and therefore it's not easy for you to claim that since you've experienced one form of oppression, you'll be sympathetic to all other things. Look at Shia and Sunni. Like if you lived in a Sunni majority area as a Shia person and the vice versa, I'm not sure how these two people can naturally sympathize with each other. But second, empirically speaking, even if you get out of oppression, human selfishness drives you to be oppressive towards other more ultra minorities. If you look at, for example, how Australia was formed, these are people, forms of criminals in which they are sent to another nation. These people were under state oppression, but these people still have things like racism and how they don't care well for the people of the poor or people of color. Essentially meaning you can't argue that just because you've experienced a form of coercion or oppression from the society, it will naturally correlate into a society where you would be able to sympathize with all these different types. I'll now explain why status quo is okay and why it's extremely hard for conservatives to breathe in a very liberal trend. And I don't think you can say that there is no liberal trend as long as there are lots of rights that are being more protected in the current status quo as opposed to, the regional states or regional powers and plantation farms in which people with power and more resources actually get to dictate a lot of things. We think that first, again, the claim that Jan mentioned about how fuzzy moral claims actually make it harder for conservatives to actually operate, and conservatives can't fight back without looking bad. And this becomes important because conservatives are also people, and people who have to care about legitimacy. Perhaps you can regress one or two things by saying that we fight against homosexuality and we go against gay marriage, but once you do so, you lose your moral side, and therefore the capital of conservatives are lost out through every fight that you try to regress. And therefore there's a limit towards as to how much conservatives can regress the liberal trend, as opposed to on your side, it becomes very easy for conservatives to simply use the contract. And here's where RPOI kicks in about how unilateral different forms of contract would exist. Because the first speaker conceded that everyone will sign the same contract, and therefore it's a very easy way out for conservatives to argue, if a conservative argues version A now, but you will simply show the same amount of contract to a different generation, it becomes very easy for past generations to be conservative. But even if we say that it can be updated for some reason, it becomes conservatives have more capital to fight against that liberal trend and oppress more minorities. For all these reasons, we think that the current system is fine as long as there's a liberal trend, and we can use moral claims to fight against conservatives. Very proud to carry
The opening up. Let's start the closing up and writing up our vote.
I hate philosophy motions,
Yeah.
and apparently the CAP loves philosophical motions. So the way that the closing government will enter today's debate is to have two unique philosophical extensions as to why a state-free zones need to exist, and these extensions stand free and stand above all of the practical constraints that were raised by opening opposition. Because the question that we need to answer is that, is there a moral justification for this kind of alternative government structure to exist in the first place? So regardless of effectiveness, regardless of the conditions of the state-free zone, an alternative option must exist for these two reasons. Firstly, CG will uniquely defend libertarians in this debate whose moral positions on governments will never be adequately represented in a world where there is an existing government and only state-free zones provide that representation. And the reason why OO and CO must defend this, because they defend democracies in which you want to represent the moral positions of people and reflecting their values. Democracies can never represent libertarians. But secondly, we're going to defend you that the very concept of borders and states within those borders are absolutely arbitrary, and why state-free zones are the best alternative to neutralize the geographical birth lottery that otherwise traps you into those suffocating state structures. These are the best opt-out mechanisms. But before that, one main question against opening opposition: how do state-free zones compare to democratic states? What opening opposition fails to realize is that when democracies function at their best, using all of the check and balance mechanisms that they told you, individuals wouldn't choose to leave. See, this is providing a safety net when those democratic functions that you analyze don't function. So this is a safety net for the worst of democracies who are actively inefficient. But secondly, we think the fact that a possible exodus can exist provides greater incentives for your democratic states to become even more efficient, because they want to prevent their citizens from leaving and suffering from a depopulation and brain drain that especially happens within developed nations who practice democratic states. But the most important moral question that we pose against opening opposition, because they didn't want minorities to leave, they wanted them to create social change. But if the alternative is I have to sacrifice my life, fight for an entire generation when the benefits of those social changes will never manifest within my lifetime, why is that a morally justified position for you to take? OO is defending minorities becoming battering rams in order to save the lives of future generations. If you recognize the fundamental freedom that every individual should have the right to live, therefore you must defend an absolute opt-out mechanism for them to leave those suffocating social structures of discrimination in which they are unable to change within their lifetime. We think there will be minorities who stay because they believe in what opening opposition believes in terms of activism and equality. But for those who do not choose to sacrifice themselves for the greater good, why do you force them to stay within those circumstances? We didn't hear moral justification as to why that was a good thing. But most importantly, closing government is very happy that defending democracies is the hill that opening opposition wants to die on, because democracies are absolutely failing. Political participation in democracies are never equal or meaningful. I can give you a 10-minute speech on A, money politics, B, tyranny of the majority, C, structural disenfranchisement of the poor of the minorities, or D, that most democracies in the world are corrupt democracies that lack the kind of checks and balances that they defend and result in the kind of democracies that are very similar to dictatorships instead. And within those structures, we have things like election rigging, and you defend those people trapped into those structural ideas. In those scenarios, living in those countries equals death. You have to defend the worst of those situations. If you conveniently only want to talk about the worst case scenarios of state-free zones, then go ahead and defend the worst case scenarios of failing democracies, because I don't think you'll be able to justify that. But secondly, even if state-free zones, I need to calm down, sit down. Even if state-free zones are not that great, we defend opening government's choice on an opt-out. But where will we uniquely enter this debate? CG will uniquely mechanize state-free zones in a way that elevates ourselves from a lot of the harm that is pointed out from opening opposition. First thing, we're going to take a harder stance. Yes, a stateless government, a stateless zone is a lawless zone only to the extent where they live free from any state intervention, so the government cannot force you to do anything because there's no government. There's also no entity to help you. But why isn't this an anarchic state where everyone can kill each other? We think at the very least you should ensure that the existence of this state can continue, so we will enforce only one universal value, which is the right to live without any intervention either from the state or either from the third party. If you cause third party harm, such as killing another person or going to the anarchic state, then we will expel you from this state, because then the state cannot survive. So in this world has nothing, no enforcement of laws, nothing subjective except the ability for people to live freely. We challenge you to reimagine the world, where this is a world that is specifically for everyone who joins it because they believe in the concept of free will, people who join it because they want to free themselves from oppressive structures. In this world, we believe people will have a distinct respect for
can fiat that rule because you need to mechanize and impose that. Like, how can you police all of those things without a state, a central authority?
No, this state does not enforce anything like a law. There's nothing subjective about people being able to live, okay? So they only enforce the right for people to live, and therefore if people break this law, and therefore harming the very concept of a state-free zone, then you have to be expelled in order for us to carry on the state-free zone to exist in the first place. Political choices. If opposition defends democracy, the moral justification behind a democracy is the representation of individuals. But absent of political choices, democracy is actually creating discrimination and oppression for people who don't even buy into concepts of a state to begin with. A state gives a disproportionate authority to politicians and provides a complete inability for individuals to stop politicians from taking away the autonomies of people the moment they are elected into power. In this debate, I invite judges to challenge your imagination of how actually do we define oppression to begin with, because oppression is a very subjective concept. It is any denial of rights. When you take away freedom of expression, there's no tangible or immediate harm on the person, but I suffer oppression because I believe that I'm being deprived of my rights. In a democracy, you don't recognize the right of libertarians who believe that any concept of the state taking away autonomy is oppressive to my rights because I don't believe in people being regulating my autonomy. It is impossible for a democracy to function like a non-interventionist state. Secondly, borders are arbitrary. States are confined to arbitrary borders. We look at the decolonization. Literally, the Brits just took a napkin and drew borders of the lines of Africa. Under status quo, when you have different conceptions of states, this is creating an otherizing us versus them mentality. Under status quo, when you want to opt out of the geographical birth lottery, other states don't allow you to come in because you are viewed as a migrant, as a foreigner, as an alien. It was hard for refugees to seek for a safe haven because they're being denied border entries because you are seen as different. A state-free zone is the only guarantee of an opt-out mechanism of a government that would never deny you that kind of safe haven. It is the only guaranteed mechanism for people to neutralize the geographical birth lottery that exists under status quo, because the very concept of states in itself means they will prioritize their citizens over other people. A state-free zone doesn't have those laws. They won't prioritize their citizens. It allows people to move freely. We proudly support a world with state-free zones.
Going for speech, let's invite him to talk.
Ladies and gentlemen, as a libertarian, as a Texan, as a relatively imaginative person, I'm extremely offended by the low quality of the closing government's case. We'll immediately tell you why they're out of this debate based on their philosophical lack of understanding. We'll then immediately go to the opening government, and then we'll finally substantialize the actual cases of the impacts of practically what happens after these motions vote. First of all, this weird question, like, we want a libertarian state. One, when was the last time a small night watchman's libertarian government was the best case to protect minorities? One. Two, by its very definition, how can you have an autocracy or authoritarian libertarian government if the very definition of libertarianism is that everyone is left to their own devices? You can't argue for non-democracies and libertarianism at the same time unless you're kind of a person that doesn't understand the concept. The very idea, I was a fool to expect that I was actually going to have some fun in here, right? The very idea that Hobbesian social contractionism says that in the natural state that will evolve and devolve into a monarchy is precisely because in the initial starting points of a society, you will become the most oppressive. We will be talking about more of the impacts there in the state-free zone, but the least of things, you're not going to have your autocracy libertarian government that also protects minorities the most. Now, and that being said, she also said that, oh, there are no borders. Borders are negative concepts. In other words, your borders are drawn by the basis of where your borders start and end and the other countries start. Unless you're going to also obliterate all states, borders will still exist. And furthermore, just because this is relevant, she said that, oh, think of the refugees. One very interesting point. If you suddenly create an out for countries that now currently signed the Refugee Convention because this is the only way that people are persecuted have to come to their countries as an obligation, if you give them an out by saying, oh, you don't have to accept them, we can just send them to Liberia, the equivalent, or in this case, Neo-Texas, then all of these countries now all lose political capital. Why they have to receive refugees in the first place? You say you protect the people of the meek. You are the worst case scenario. You're out of this debate. Now let's go to the opening government. As a Texan, the first problem that you have as a Texan is if you have random people that you don't want coming in. One, this is the location has the most per capita crazy people with guns. One, they will refuse the federal government's order to evacuate and give up all their property. And two, they will probably shoot the gays and the brown people, all the people that they don't want, because they say, I'm now here to take your stuff, and I'd like to see you take it from me, is not the best place where you want to put the most oppressed people in Texas. That being said, it still doesn't explain how the hell are you going to then ensure, as our extension will show, in the worst case scenarios, how are you going to solve the problem of what happened in the realistic case of things like Israel, of Liberia, of America, where you have people coming in all oppressed, knowing that why they were oppressed was because they had a lack of power. Just because you're oppressed doesn't mean that you're sympathetic to the people. It means that you are now more clairvoyant of what happens when you don't have power. And that's why the Zionists were the most oppressive. That was why the Liberians that were chased from America to Liberia were the most oppressive. That was why, because the Americans that fled their own British masters were the most oppressive to the Native Americans. So you ensure, we broke this deadlock where we'll ensure that these are the people that are going to be the most oppressive to each other. And then ultimately it's going to be the biggest gun that's going to dominate and create an oppressive autocracy. The most worst case ever. You let them avoid a mild discrimination that at least allowed them to sign a contract and leave, that luckily did not commit genocide instead, into basically Mad Max's Thunderdome, where let the first one that ever gets on top eat each other. So you're also out of this debate. Our unique extension, please sit down, will be as follows. We all talked about the worst case scenarios. What about the poor people and the oppressed? We will tell you the opposite. Imagine it, if you will. Take Iron Land. What if the opposite happens? If you ensure that you're going to give Texas and the best resources, what stops all the captains of industry instead of going there? Especially if the liberal trend in developed countries is you need to have more responsibility. You need to pay more tax. You need to be a person that is responsible for the others of your community. I would be, as the fountainhead or Ayn Rand's, Atlas Shrugged said, who is John Galt. Let's go. For video game fans, let's go for Bioshock's Rapture. We're going to create a libertarian small country where all the people are self-sufficient, will go in, take over, and then leave all the resources to tax base, the innovators, the people that will have to be taxed from their resources and create their own new community. That's our first extension, because your lack of imagination isn't examining the other way around. If you tell the rich people, the people that don't want to be taxed, don't want to have more responsibilities of communitarians or whatnot, and you tell them, well, you're stuck here, where else are you going to go? Europe, America, all these developed countries are now showing trends where the infrastructure and whatnot is showing more pressure to have more responsibilities. Now the state-free zone is the perfect place where Iron Randian objectivist libertarians can say, fuck it, we'll make our own country. We'll have our own country with blackjacks and hookers, like Futurama said, and we're going to make a better country. That state, the country with the remnants of that country, have no one to then hold that up. There is nobody to collect tax from. There is nobody to actually push industries. You are leaving the middle class and the lower class with nobody to actually support the entire community. We believe that this is another, more likely scenario, if anything, never really mentioned unique extension. Now let's go to the more conventional cases, the worst case scenario. Before that, yes?
Be charitable. In our worst case.
Who is more likely to leave everything they have their original state, their state-free zone? The ultra-rich that you talk about, or the actual disprivileged?
If you're a country that at least allows them to sign a contract or leave, they're at least somewhat manageable. If you have an income tax of 80%, I think those are the people that will probably go to Texas and get all their oil if you ensure by fiat that that's what they're going to get. You basically give them the best piece of land with the best resources. If you ensure that to the same standard, that's what poor people. Here's the thing. We already tried this. America, Australia, Israel. We've seen the cases where if you put these people together, there is no control. There's going to be a huge fight. They kept not here though because they assumed both sides. We broke that deadlock by saying the reason is because the psychology of the people that are running away are not necessarily altruists, and they wanted communists as well, like the commune, they're going to be Amish. No, they're not. They understand whoever takes first hand can take for posterity the entirety of what the control of that future will be. There will be ensured perpetuate fighting because there's no one case, because there's no authority. Whoever takes the land now is going to be the full authority there. There is no democracy. There's not even a a sliver of the minimum level of those things that ensure minorities protection. You are fleeing from small oppressors to the oppressed oppressing each other. That is the worst case scenario. You cannot break out of this unless that you somehow also, too late, ensure that the state-free zone, other than have a piece of chunk of land, has some system that can be logically inferred that will prevent this from happening. No analysis whatsoever. We believe that in the case, every scenario, you give people land as a reason to run away from changes, you will destroy what is a democracy, which is basically a negotiation of civilized people into a hellhole. For these reasons, closing opposition wins. Thank you.
As a government whip, I think the CEO's extension is just a rehash of open opposition of why state-free zones are harmful. But my member has already talked about the philosophical justification that stays above all the harms that the opening opposition has talked about. And I want to point out that I think the member of opposition is the one who doesn't understand what real libertarianism means. We have to compare the intervention between the libertarianism and the intervention that exists on the opposition side. A state-free zones intervention is the minimalist intervention that only exists just to guarantee the freedom of the people's life. However, the intervention that exists in democracy is prevailing in all aspects of society, which I think that if we compare the intervention, we believe the state-free zones intervention is much more minimal and much more justifiable. Therefore, even if minimum intervention exists on our side, which one is the closest approximation to the ideals of the libertarianism? We believe that the CEO has to defend democracy, never representing the need of representation. Also, we have to ensure who is the most oppressive in this case. Opposition is not being charitable to the government. They are only focusing on our worst case of the government view. If you believe that the state-free zone is that bad, we're not forcing them to stay in the state-free zones. We're just giving them the choice. If it is that bad, people won't even go to the state-free zone in the first place. Therefore, the pressure that the opening opposition wants against the conservatives to change the society will still exist. Therefore, we believe that our case is still dealing with our worst case scenario. Even if in our worst case scenario, we've already talked about how we're not forcing them to leave in state-free zone. We're not making these government entities to now make any social change. We still believe that if it is that bad, as the opposition side thinks, we still believe that people can still stay in their nations. Now,
Before you go. Yeah, so you're not responding to the claim that if you have this option, you're essentially pushing the original nations to be more oppressive, which is why exactly if you don't respond to why state-free zones are so good, you lose this debate.
we still believe that because we're not forcing them, now the pressure that you want the conservatives to make this change will still exist in this nation's side. Therefore, we believe that we're not just making them to just go there, not making any change. Now, to go on to my clashes, I'd like to first prove why democracy versus state-free zone is better. We believe that democracy has failed in protecting the minorities in the society. We believe that because they don't have any representations, they don't have any rights, we believe that it is very unfair. The opening opposition only stands when they prove why government is a whole peaceful entity, why these conservatives who actually make the change are actually peaceful. Actually, there's no such thing as peaceful government entity because the democracy government that we see in the status quo right now is all corrupt and only
Here.
similar as dictatorship. The justification used in democracy, like they said, representation or free choice, is all actually relevant to our state-free zone. In the status quo, they intervene the minorities' representations and choice by arbitrary choices such as borders and even bribery and even political fights. The changes that the conservatives make and that they say in the opposition side is still something very arbitrary. Even everything that is controlled by the government, we still think that even if in their best case, even if they make some kind of choices, we think that is very insulting because it was something a right that the minorities need to have in the first place. Also, oppression is very subjective because the government even still, they might feel that they are not oppressing the people. They might still think that they're making a very good change. However, there will be still minorities who are feeling oppressed in that society. There is still a subtle oppression that they still not feel in their culture, that they do not like this democracy society. Therefore, we believe that we are actually giving them a safety net. Even in the worst case where democracy has failed, we can still give these minorities a chance to live in a better society. Therefore, we have extended to a libertarian value where real freedom of choice is guaranteed and real representation is guaranteed. And also, we're providing the safety net for the worst of the democracy state. Therefore, making better democracy. Therefore, we believe that we can give better choices for these minorities in the first place. Also, second of all, my member has uniquely proved why borders are very arbitrary. We believe that social in the status quo, it is really difficult for people to opt out. Even for the people who are not deemed as minorities in that society, we still think there is no viable alternative because the comparative is just staying in the state or leaving to another state, which means that these people who are not even minorities in the first place, they will be still deemed as immigrants, as a foreigner, which is seen as a threat to the society and even a criminal, and these kinds of negative images. We think that now it becomes much more harder for you to opt out of this society, of this state, even if you want to, because now you're deemed as a very criminal and a threat to the society.
Before you go on.
Let alone the minorities that the opponent government talked about. But we are still talking about the numerous people trapped in arbitrary standards such as borders. They are limiting them to be accepted in the society being only where they have been. We are not letting them to be actually accepted as a social being in other countries, because now once you leave this country, you're deemed as a foreigner, you're deemed as an outsider, you're deemed as someone that can be a potential threat to the society, therefore not able to fit in. We believe that we are dealing with these minorities cases better, and therefore we think that the opposition sides are failing in these cases. Yes.
Jews are the most prosecuted, African slaves are the most prosecuted. This isn't the worst case scenario, this is the only scenario. They know the currency of power, they will hold on to it. Give me an alternative why that will not happen just because we're persecuted.
We believe that these kinds of oppressions will not exist on our safe-free zone because this is something that we're going against. People will not opt into these kinds of acts because now people out of safe-free zones will know people will leave their country if they keep on these kinds of negative facts. And also safe-free zones people, even if they have some minimal amount of interventions or even if some minimal amount of conflicts among them, we still believe it's much more better because these are all heading to the end goal of making them to live in a very free society where which they have been oppressed of the choices in the first place. Therefore, as the government says, because we have proved the philosophical reason why, even if all those harms exist in their status quo, because it is going to exist on both worlds anyway, we're going to prove the philosophical moral reason why this all outstands all the other benefits and harms they're talking about. We are actually providing the moral principle justifications that was actually used to defend the democracy that the opposition side wants to go out for in the first so much. Therefore, we believe that safe-free zone is much more better in protecting these kinds of rights in the first place. Therefore, proud to propose.
amazing, but I really wanted to ask during the entire tournament season, is it a new trend not to engage and you win? And you choose areas where you want to engage and you win for that? We want to really? Okay. So because I deny that trend. Because as for me, as an old dinosaur like Konde, I would like to engage with every single thing and show you and clear up the debate and let's really solve the deadlock here. Firstly, a discussion on choice. Because surprisingly, nobody compared. They claim from opening government that social contract in itself is an oppression because people did not choose to stay in that state. But is that really true? Firstly, we want to deny the notion that social contract is an oppression. In fact, that what people consider to be oppressed, like not able to choose certain things, it is in order to protect them from other persons intervening their rights. For example, even if I hate Seth, I want to kill him, somebody else may hate me and kill me. And social contract protects that. We don't know why that notion is called an oppression, simply because it takes away people's liberty on certain degrees. But secondly, even if so, we think that one situation that these individuals will be pushed to make coerced decision at the first place. So opening government says that they want to defend choice. I'm going to prove you why, 4 reasons why this is eventually not going to protect freedom of choice. Firstly, this will be a coerced decision. They claim that closing government say this is a coerced decision, but no, that's the argument from our side. These oppressed minorities will now be forced to push away to this so-called state-free zone. They call it state-free zone, but we think it's going to be created a zone where these minorities, oppressed minorities, are isolated. We don't think that's the choice at the end of the day. But secondly, nobody discussed this. If forefathers decided to leave the land, we want to question, what about the descendants? Would they be given a choice to stay in the state zone or state-free zone? We don't think that's the case. Or it will be the case where they would actually turn back, which is our third reason. Thirdly, this choice will be irreversible. Why? Because they move to state-free zone, and let's say they suffer from enormous amount of chaos because there's no government, there's no police department or whatnot. So they want to come back to the society. But is that choice can be reversible? No, it's not. Why is that so? Because it's not reversible. Think about Yoo Seung-jun, man. Like all the men here would hate Yoo Seung-jun because he's trying to come back to Korea because he used all the privilege and he denied the requirements that he was given and then he moved, but then he said, oh, but I want to come back. That's the analogy here. What about these forefathers' descendants? Because his forefathers regret the decision, they want to give their children a choice again. This will be similar analogy like anchor babies. Like immigrants want to simplify that just before they give birth to a baby and they just give them a social contract. What is the ideal situation that's going to happen? So society, the remnants would hate them. The remnants will hate them and therefore they will be discriminated. This means that this choice cannot be reversible. This means that freedom of choice 101, if the choice is irreversible and if people cannot foresee the consequences, therefore we cannot demand them to suffer the consequences of their choice. Irreversibility is a crucial area why we should not say that this is a choice. But more than that, even if we buy with everything, we think there's plenty of alternative in the status quo. We want to defend the status quo. Such as if you don't like the state system, you can choose to immigrate, right? And you can choose to, flee to other nations. The border, the arbitrariness of border, the borders does not force you to stay within the border. Some people who's not satisfied can move. Why should they be coerced to make a choice to move to state-free zone? And they talk about libertarianism. Okay, let's do this. Libertarianism is not survival of the fittest. It's asking of freedom and also at the same time demanding a protection of their freedom from other people's different rights. We think state-free zone cannot provide that. Now let's move on to more crucial areas, scenario comparison. Now, let's not call it best case scenario or worst case scenario. Let's call it scenario A, scenario B. Scenario A, utopia created by elitist societal members, like rich people, those people, intelligence people. These people choose to leave the state because they don't want to pay tax to the state. That was a unique extension coming from opposition, using our imagination. No response whatsoever from closing government, but we think this is still valid. Why is that so? Because the real question is, what happens to the remnants? What happens to the people who stay in the society? Those middle class, those impoverished individuals.
these people will suffer from their choice. But what's worse is that because of this motion, now government cannot ask more from the rich. Now government will always have to, think like, oh, if I ask more tax from the rich people, they would choose to leave. Then I would have sufferings of lack of budget. That is the likely scenario that's going to happen when this option is given. That's scenario A. That's why we were the ones who actually discussed about that. Let's talk about scenario B, where most room wanted to discuss about the idea of oppression. Right? We think this is more bizarre. Why? Because they say that suddenly, people will become empathetic because they are persecuted. But we want to first talk about why this is not a debate about what kind of characteristic that humans really are. Are they empathetic in nature or not? No, I don't want to defend that they would not be empathetic, but I want to question them why they suddenly believe that state is oppressive in nature with same groups of humans, but suddenly state-free zone, these people will be empathetic. This is just logical issue. There's no reason for Sebon to spend 2 minutes to respond why humans won't be empathetic. This is simply a logical issue, right? Debate is logical, right? But more than that, CG says that, why should they be forced to stay here and pursue social change? No, that's not it. The reason, when this motion passes, what happens is the remnants will now say, minorities, you don't like the system, you leave. This is not about this. But we're saying that society will change only when these people are forced to be bind together in one group. That's why social change only comes. And we think that likely scenario actually what was analyzed by the closing government is happening on our side of the model, because now these minorities will be pushed away. They will be forced to make a choice to leave the state if they don't like the system, right? But my would say that these anarchy zone will still be in peace. Why? Because if you kill, you'll be expelled. But who expels who? Right? It's in state-free zone. And the fact that they say that proves that first dwellers would be holding power and still remain oppressive. So they go against oppressive idea, but they actually show us that this state-free zone will be oppressive in nature. Lastly, on the issues about refugees, nobody discussed that. We told you that now countries lose political capital to accept refugees. But rather what happens is, these refugees will be simply sent to state-free zone, aka non-ignorant zone, ignorant zone, where countries have no burden to care for these most unfortunate people. Because we win on both scenario A and oh my god, I always don't have conclusion. I win.
Thank you.
John Vincent Galas.
Are you his mother?
It was John Vincent Galas.
How do you want to go about this? When should we begin the